Okay, good day to everyone. I have made two videos about this already, but after reading some of the comments that were left, um, one did strike my fancy, and it was basically stating that this whole situation was scary. And it is pretty scary. And being that it's Halloween, I thought it would be appropriate to just go ahead and make another video about the lawsuits, because apparently there are multiple lawsuits. So I just wanted to make a video, maybe going over the main two. One being TD Bank. So that's what we have here. Apparently, TD Bank is actually a subsidiary of a company that's owned in Canada, which I thought was funny because TD Bank, I believe their motto is that they're America's most convenient bank, and yet it's a subsidiary of another country's bank. But anywho, so this is a article from December 2021, and the dates are going to become important in a second. So this was written in 2021 regarding TD Bank's lawsuit with Plaid. Now, also take note that Plaid is a data aggregator. Data aggregator, or just aggregator, means to collect, basically. So Plaid is a company that collects data or information, and it's a fintech company, a financial technology company. So this is basically e-data, things over the internet, so on and so forth. So Plaid is a company whose job it is to collect information on, for what Etsy's purpose, on users, on sellers. So just keep all that in mind because this is going to get scarier as we go. So on this article, I'm not going to try to read the whole thing, but like I said before, TD Bank is a subsidiary of a Canadian bank company or a Canadian group. They settled a lawsuit against the data aggregator as it stood accused of using TD Bank's logo to trick users into handing over personal data that can later be monetized. So what does that mean? So essentially, TD Bank accused Plaid of creating a faux website or a dupe website to collect user data. And then it says that can be later monetized. That's the part that I want to draw people's attention to, because in the age of the internet, one of the biggest fears is your information being stolen and then sold on the black market. So this data aggregator company, Plaid, has to rely on trust and honesty in order to operate. And yet here we are reading an article regarding a lawsuit where they have abused that trust. So um, this is a very big deal that can be later monetized because of the claims that Plaid is making in regards to the Etsy situation. So we'll go into that a little bit later. So this also, I want you to keep in mind, that can be later monetized. So there is a fiduciary, or a, uh, how do I say, there is uh, a basically a money sack that can be placed on that information. That information that Plaid is aggregating or collecting on users or persons is of value. That you could put a dollar sign to that. That information is of value. That's my point with this statement here, that can be later monetized, because it is of value. Somebody will pay money for that information. So the judge basically ordered, I tried to find the filing in the New Jersey court. I couldn't find it. If somebody else can, I would love to read the complaint that was filed. Because when you're reading it in articles and in the or from the subsidiary TD Bank themselves, they kind of fill it with a little bit of fluff. Um, but the complaints usually get down to brass tacks, so I couldn't find it. I didn't dig for it very deeply, but that is something that does interest me. Documents filed ahead of the order show the bank requested a dismissal because the matter had been settled amicably. So basically, TD Bank filed a lawsuit against Plaid, and then they uh, filed for it to be dismissed because they handled it behind the scenes. Now, why would TD Bank do that? There's a lot of reasons. Nobody, especially TD Bank, wants it perpetuated that their users' data could have been compromised. Banks don't want that information out there, so that actually does help TD Bank. So that's why they would have settled it out of court. So that does make sense. But for Plaid, it also gives them plausible deniability. And I believe the settlement was sealed, so we don't know what came of that settlement, if Plaid had to admit doing this or not. It's also it's also good to note that this was I believe, a civil case, as I would think creating a mock bank website, stealing logos in order to trick users into stealing their username and password and any other information that would have been made available to them, would be illegal. So this isn't a criminal suit. Nobody got arrested for this, which you would think somebody would. I mean, they're out there arresting people for just smelling like marijuana in certain states, and yet this company can just create a whole fake website and steal bankers' information and ruin people's lives. So that's pretty interesting that nobody got arrested. Again, this was all civil, and I don't know if Plaid was ever investigated by any federal agency out there that probably should be looking into this to file criminal complaint. That's also very interesting to me. But TD Bank decided to cut their costs and just say, okay, let's settle this out of court. Plaid agreed. So they shook hands and went along their merry way. But basically, this is a case that was brought against Plaid for creating a user interface for financial service applications. This is also a big to-do. This is a big deal, and we're going to go into that a little bit. For financial service apps that infringe on the bank's trademarks, logos, and green color scheme. So why would Plaid want to create an interface that dupes customers into believing they're entering personal information into TD's bank's trusted platform? That's a very interesting word to use, because we're going to go into that aspect in the next article. But I wanted to also make note, since this was handled out of court, they settled amicably. Plaid denied trying to use tricks. Plaid denied trying to trick users into handing over personal information and said it was caught off guard by the lawsuit because it had been working to resolve the issue with the bank for quite some time. I don't know how you can work with somebody to solve this matter. Either you created a fake website to dupe customers or you didn't. You used their color scheme or you didn't. You used their logos or you didn't. You used their trademarks or you didn't. So I don't know how you could say that, but this is a very, I don't want to say political, but this is a very business response. And I think it's quite BS. But you know, when you're being sued for something like this, you gotta say something. So I guess that's the most adequate thing to say in response to a case like this, especially a civil case like this for a company or two companies that are humongous. So let's go on to the next article. So it's best to get the story from the horse's mouth. So this is TD Bank, and this is their website and their story on the trademark infringement. So, and this is from 2020. So I believe this incident took place in before 2020, because they got sued and that whole rigmarole went through by the end of 2020. And I believe we're going to see some dates here in a second regarding some of this. But just note, so TD Bank filed the infringement lawsuit against Plaid roughly in 2020. So from the horse's mouth, TD Bank files trademark counterfeiting and infringement lawsuit against Plaid in the U.S. Suit filed to protect TD's U.S. customers and brand from Plaid's unauthorized use of TD's name, logos, and trademark. So you're also using their name, which would be the #1 thing used to need to dupe somebody. So I'm not going to read all of this again. But here it says, after repeated attempts to work through these issues with Plaid, TD is taking legal action to protect our customers and our brand, said the CEO of TD Bank. Plaid's intentional, unauthorized use of TD's name, trademark, and logos is deceptive. By mimicking TD's login screen, Plaid creates false impression that consumers are engaging directly with TD Bank or entering their bank credentials into TD secure digital and mobile app platforms or a platform authorized by TD when that's not the case. So that's very important, because they're mimicking the app as well. So they have a website, they have apps. So essentially, they're just pretending to be TD, which is I believe it states somewhere in this article, here it is, that TD Bank, America's most convenient bank, is one of the 10 largest banks in the United States, providing more than 9 million customers. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of information that they would essentially have access to. And again, from reading the policies, or excuse me, the end user policy from the previous video, when TD Bank gets a hold of your credentials, they have access to not only the bank account, or one bank account, they have access to multiple bank accounts. So think of what Plaid would have been able to have access to by duping customers to handing over their user and passwords unknowingly. So Plaid may have had access to these victims, I'm going to call them victims, or alleged victims, for an extended period of time, because the alleged victims needed to be notified that this happened, then they would change their password. So Plaid had access to their information for quite some time. That's enough to either download or aggregate information from those accounts. And they would have had access to everything in their account, not just a single checking account or saving account. They would have access to everything: loans, credit cards, and the like. And TD Bank is not a federal credit union. That's also a thought that I had. Federal credit unions are an interesting financial service or financial institution, right? So federal credit service or unions, you have to be kind of grandfathered in by somebody, or you have to be fathered in by somebody. I forget the terminology for it. So basically, if my dad is in the military and he gets a federal credit union account with, USAA, Navy Federal, so on and so forth, he can create an account for me. So now I have access to the federal credit union, and that's how it works. And especially for young children of military members, typically the first bank account you're going to have is tied to your parents' account, right? And sometimes you don't sever that tie as you get older. You just kind of let the account sit there so you can share money back and forth with family members. So think about that as well. I mean, you might grow to open up an additional checking account that only you have access to, but you still have that other account that's tied to family members. So if Plaid ever got access to information like that in a federal credit union, they could have access to your family members, which is a very harrowing thought to have when you're dealing with a company that just kind of explicitly told you, hey, if you give us access to one account, you may give me your checking and your routing account and bank account for your checking account, but we may also have access to your savings, your credit cards, your loans, and potentially, if it's a federal credit union, that account that you shared with your father, that account that you shared with a family member to be able to transfer money easily and for free to family members. Think about that. So let's get back on topic here, back to TD Bank. So this is 10 largest banks, one of the 10 largest banks in America. And that's the bank that they chose to, allegedly chose to dupe. So that is violating trust, and I would think some federal and state laws, but apparently nothing's come of that. I don't know why some three-letter organization or agency isn't looking into them for that. But that is at minimum a violation of trust. But this is just one lawsuit. So that's the lawsuit filed by TD Bank. They created a fake account in order to steal users' data. Now, that's the takeaway from, or one of the takeaways from this lawsuit, is that it was done in order to essentially acquire user data that could potentially be later monetized. So there is a value of what they did. And Plaid gets to play stupid. They get to say, oh, we have no idea. That's not, we didn't do any dirty tricks. I mean, I'm still confused as to how you can deny something like that. Either you did it or you didn't. So that's a very interesting situation there. Now, here's Plaid's, an article on Plaid's response to all of this. And this was written in 2020 again. So I believe the fallout from the settlement had already occurred in late 2020. So that means this had to be filed. The court system moves very slow, and this was probably during the time of Corona. So This had to be from like 2019, 2018 perhaps, to reach this phase by October 2020. So this is an article on a website called Payments. Plaid surprised at TD Bank's lawsuit alleging it tricked consumers. There is a video in here that's pretty interesting, and it details how it is essential. One of the takeaways from the video for me was that it stated that it is essential for consumers to have trust in the platforms that they use. And even though this was written in October 2020, I think that goes straight to Etsy in 2022. Consumers, i.e. sellers, have to have trust in the platform, i.e. Etsy, that they use. And when Etsy is forcing sellers to hand over that data to a company like Plaid, who had just been sued, and we're about to go into the second lawsuit, for mishandling or violating people's trust in that very data that could be used for monetary purposes, that could be monetized. So I thought that was very interesting. It's a very short video, but I'm not going to show it here just in case. But basically, Plaid is denying that it had used TD Bank's logo to dupe customers. So again, with this settlement out of court, no side, I guess it wasn't included in the settlement, that Plaid had to admit guilt. So Plaid gets to deny everything, TD Bank gets to keep their name, and gets Plaid to take down their fraud website, allegedly. But here's a part that starts to get a little bit scary. So let's look at this article. Plaid is denying that they used TD Bank's logo to dupe customers, yada yada yada, into sending information that it could monetize. Yes, information is money. Clearly, we all know that. That's what a lot of paranoia around using the internet has instilled into everyone. Plaid said it's also disappointed that TD Bank has filed a lawsuit, blah blah blah. Right. Plaid software includes helping popular apps like Venmo and Square. I'm only going to focus on Venmo and Square. I'm somewhat familiar with Stripe, but think about Venmo and Square, and Stripe access bank credit card info, and the company says that they have been working with TD for quite some time and are disappointed that they would resort to litigation and false allegations. They're being very vague with the false allegations because that is kind of a blanket statement, because there is a possibility that TD Bank may have said one word out of pocket, and they can point to that as a false allegation versus saying what the false allegations were, and then TD Bank can come back and slap them with that settlement, because I'm pretty sure in one of America's 10 largest banks, they're going to have something in there that says if you violate X line, or you say XYZ, we are going to sue you 10 ways from Sunday. So that's why that statement is actually very vague, because it just says, oh, it's false allegations. Okay, what allegations were false? That, for example, if I call somebody 10 foot, or excuse me, if somebody calls me 5 foot and I say, well, I'm actually 5'2", so that's a false allegation. Yeah, so on and so forth. It gets into the weeds when you start talking about our judicial system. So you have to be very specific. So that is actually a very gray area, and that's why you have to look into things a little bit deeper. You can't look at them at face value, especially when you're dealing with two large companies like Plaid and TD Bank. So Plaid can say this without getting into trouble, but if they ever got into more detail, then I would think TD Bank would come back and make them regret their words. So, but this is what is a large takeaway from this article here. So they're helping popular apps like Venmo and Square. Plaid is publicly known for never selling. Plaid is publicly known for never selling or renting consumers' personal information, the company said. So Plaid gets to say about themselves, we are publicly known for never selling or renting consumers' personal information, and yet you just settled with TD Bank for duping customers. Again, either the website existed or it didn't. The name was taken or it wasn't. The logos were used or they weren't. So to say this is kind of funny, because who knows that? It's publicly known. Who knows that? How do you prove that it's publicly known for never selling? Because you said it? That's what makes it publicly known? Because if, obviously it doesn't say it's publicly believed, especially not now. So Plaid faced civil suit, again, civil, not criminal, for some reason. Faced civil suit, yada, yada, yada. Said that Plaid tricked customers into thinking they were entering personal information into the TD Bank's platform, yada, yada, yada. Plaid denies it, and they ended up, let's look down here. Plaid has seen a number of class action lawsuits. Ooh, this is interesting. Let's look at that paragraph. Plaid has seen a number of class action lawsuits accusing it of selling information obtained from logins from millions of customers without the practice of being disclosed. One of them, Payments Reports, said the California-based company has been engaging in such practices for years and has affected upwards of 200 million of individual accounts. While the company's modus operandi, MO, states that it intends to power digital finance and fintech issues from its own digital network, criticisms have come in over the years that the company has made a habit of taking the information for itself and selling it or misusing it without that information being disclosed. So basically not telling people. So let's take a step back and think about this for a second. So this company that is pretty big, I mean, they're helping Venmo and Square and TD Bank, one of America's 10 largest banks. So this is supposed to be a pretty legitimate company. It's supposed to be a trusted company. And yet it has seen several class action lawsuits for violating the very trust in what is supposed to be their job, right? You're supposed to be trusted with this information. And they have been sued and settled with TD Bank for allegedly stealing or attempting to steal people's usernames, passwords, and access to their bank information, right? And here it says that it's the company's MO to acquire that information via digital networks and then made a habit out of potentially selling or misusing that very information that they're supposed to be trusted with. So first, let's think about how they acquired that information. They acquired it by illicit means, allegedly, creating a dupe website. So I want this information, so I'm going to do something to acquire that information illegally, essentially, or unethical or immoral, allegedly, right? To get that data. Obviously, if I'm doing something to acquire something of value, I'm probably going to make it worth my while by selling that information. For example, I'm not going to break into a bank to not steal the money. I'm doing an illicit, illegal act, right? But I'm not going to take the thing that's of value. That's what Plaid's being trusted with when it comes to Etsy. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. So let's look at the second issue here. The second settlement, which was the big settlement that I've discussed already in the previous videos regarding the 58 million. So this is an article because some people didn't think that the Plaid settlement was real, because when things like this happen and you'll randomly get an email saying, hey, da 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 da, you could get money, and people may have not thought that was real. So this article was written, and this was a big slap in my face when I saw this. So let's go to the top here. Not much up there. So yes, the Plaid action settlement notice is real. So you receive a notice that you may have been one of the affected, and some people may not have taken that seriously or thought it was real or not. You may be eligible for money if you lived in the United States and connected a financial account to an app like Venmo, hold on to your butts, between January 2013 and November 2021. So that's a good swath of people over the course of almost a decade. Almost a decade. This goes back to 2013. So that's a lot of people affected. And honestly, 58 million wasn't enough. I don't think it was enough. So let's read on. If you own a smartphone, you likely use it at least one. Money have to pay bills, da 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 da, do life things. Plaid Inc. is a financial technology company that creates a link between users' bank accounts and 5,000 money apps. Let's read that again. 5,000 money apps. Not people. Apps, applications. Venmo, Square, those are the two largest apps, two of the largest apps used by who? Creators on YouTube, creators online, businesses. So, like, let's see, back in the day, there used to be these guys in trench coats that would just flash people. So, like a flasher who only flashes blondes, Plaid apparently likes to go after small business owners. They have a preference, it seems, because Venmo, Square are apps that are highly used and advertised to small businesses and creators on YouTube, which are a lot of times are also small businesses. So they have a preference of victims that they like to go after, allegedly. Some people have received emails notifying them that they're eligible for a payment because of the class action lawsuit. I've already discussed that. And they don't know if it's real. So here's the class action lawsuit. It was from a court case, Codal versus Plaid, that alleges Plaid used consumers' banking login credentials to harvest and sell detailed financial data without their consent. So we went over that in the previous video. That's where the 58 million class action loss or settlement came from. I wasn't aware that it was it reached all the way back to 2013 for people who could have been affected by Plaid's alleged wrongdoing. And again, this is a settlement, so Plaid again gets to say, "Oh, we're not admitting guilt. We deny all allegations of any wrongdoing, but we're paying 58 million." This one was I guess not as sealed or as TD Banks because we don't know what that settlement was. It could have not even been for money. It could have just been taking down the website, maybe paying some fines, not actually for profit or suing them for millions and millions of dollars. So these are two totally different settlements, but very close together because I didn't look into it. So this settlement was completed in late 2021. So this is after TD Bank's settlement. So back to back. These are just two, and the other article discussed that there were several class action lawsuits. So this company could have been sued multiple times. I have yet to find any credible evidence that they have actually taken money out of anybody's account that can be linked back to Plaid directly. So there could be a lot of situations where people's information was aggregated by Plaid and allegedly or potentially sold to someone who then, or another third-party individual or company who then did some illicit acts to steal from those potential victims, as Plaid being the alleged middleman between that transaction, going from the trusted application or bank, Plaid aggregating their information, then allegedly selling that information that was aggregated to a third party that then conducts an illicit act on based on the information that was aggregated by Plaid. So that's a very hard thing to prove, I would assume, because Plaid could just, again, deny and say, well, that information could have been aggregated from somewhere else, or they could have bought that data from another third-party company, yada, yada, yada. Black market is really big, and it's called the black market for a reason. It's dark down there. So I just wanted to highlight these are two totally separate settlements and what they kind of involved, and it is pretty scary. So happy Halloween. And here is a website actually that was created from the Plaid settlement. I wasn't aware of it until after April 2022, and I'm pretty sure if I had put my information in here, I was probably a victim. Again, 200 million individuals with 5,000 apps. That's a whole host of people. Like I said, I think each individual who had filed for compensation from this settlement, I think they would have gotten like $13.50, which I don't think was enough. That's why I don't think the 58 million was enough, because I think there were a lot more victims than 58 million can cover. But you know, you got to keep it real. I would have liked that this company would have been sued into oblivion and then have them investigated for potential criminal acts. But when you were dealing with companies, it's actually really hard to prove that a company did something wrong. If you've ever noticed that, especially in, I think it was the late 90s, early 2000s, when the company CEOs were falling like flies and all the fraud was being wrung out and hung out to dry, as the internet was coming of age. So this is the website where people could have filed their claims. Again, Plaid is just denying all of this, but they are having to pay up. You know, one final thought here. So Etsy, let's bring it full circle. Etsy is telling consumers to trust Plaid. So, excuse me. Let's bring it full circle here. So, Plaid, when it came to TD Bank, created a fake, alleged fake website in order to get users' usernames and passwords to their bank accounts, right? That's the allegation. They created a fake website in order to dupe users. Now, with Etsy, excuse me, that they were duping users and not telling them that they were duping users. Now with Etsy, it seems that Plaid may have learned their lesson, because all Plaid really had to do was team up with a company like Etsy and say, hey, get your users to just hand over that data, right? Just give us that information. And that's exactly what Etsy's doing. Etsy is saying to sellers during the most important time of year, coming off a pandemic, when sellers are too busy trying to create and sell, they're telling sellers, hey, just give this third-party company your username and your password to your financial institution. So now Plaid, doesn't even have to create a fake website mimicking a financial institution, allegedly. All they have to do is team up with Etsy, who will then hand over that information. So this is a company that has been multi-times accused of aggregating, selling, and or misusing said data. But Etsy's saying, hey, trust this third-party company who has aggregated, stole, and or misused the said data that Etsy is forcing sellers to hand over to them. So now, why steal what it can just be handed over to me? Like, information that, again, can be monetized. And trust that this company is not going to monetize it. It's all built on trust. And this company has been, has been sued and settled back years for violating that very trust. 200 million people affected, or potentially affected, by this company misusing and or selling that trust. So Etsy is just handing over the information, versus now Plaid doesn't have to steal it. They don't have to use illicit means, and their end user policy, which we went over, is convoluted and a hard read. So now they can say, yeah, we disclose this. We disclose that if you give us your routing number and bank account number, that we may gain access to your credit card, your loans, your savings account, and any other accounts that you have with that financial institution. Yeah, we told you we might be able to do that. Maybe. It's not a definite. It could happen. We could get access to your social security number. That could happen. We could get access to enough information to aggregate on you in order to know you better than you know you. That could happen. That's in Plaid's end user policy. That, in my opinion, that's how I read it. Again, it's a hard read, it's a long read, but it's a convoluted read, and I think it's written that way for a reason. If you ever read a terms and service policy, they're written that way for reasons. The judicial system isn't for the people. It's to keep lawyers lawyering. If you ever been to court, you know the pain. The court system or judicial system says you don't have to have an attorney, but in order to just translate that into human speak, you have to have an attorney, essentially. So it's an ugly mess. This is an ugly mess. And the fact that this company still exists is harrowing. And if you're scared, you should be. Not just because it's October 31st, 2022, but this company should have been hung out to dry. And the fact that Etsy chose this company to hand over what they have been accused of stealing in the past, and then tell the sellers that it's okay, just trust them. They will not monetize what they have been alleged to monetize in the past. Multiple civil suits, multiple, back to back, year after year, hundreds of thousands of victims or alleged victims, potential victims by this company. Oh my goodness. Why rob the bank when the bank manager just opens the door and leaves the vault door open for you? You know, this is like giving a child a Christmas present in November and telling them not to peek. Make it make sense. This is like giving a lion a hunk of meat, fresh meat, their favorite food, and telling them, don't eat it. I mean, this information will be stored by this company for who knows how long, and who knows what servers, for who knows who to hack. And again, this company may have learned their lesson. They went from doing potentially illicit acts to aggregate that information to just getting a company to hand it over. So why not just say, hey, oh, we accidentally got hacked. Oopsies. Don't know how that happened. We got hacked. All your information's on the black market. We don't know. Uh-oh. Oh dear, how did that happen? The, the bad guys must have got really good. I mean, think about it. If I'm Plaid, and I do have, and I have the potentially dubious morals that Plaid seems to have, and ethics that Plaid seems to have, I could just sell that information to a third or fourth party. I don't even know what it's called at this point. I could sell that data that I aggregated via Etsy, those sellers' information, to someone, and then just say I got hacked, or hire somebody to hack me in a, most pathetic kind of way. They can be the juicy sommelier of fintech. Think about it. Happy Halloween, everybody.